These green hills and silver waters are my home. They belong to me.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming out today to celebrate our countdown to Election Day kickoff. Yay! The primary election is 1 week from tomorrow. The election takes place on August 14th, and we are so excited to have everyone come down here to support Brenda Siegel in her run for governor for her historic grassroots effort. No PAC money, no corporate money, because Brenda believes, as do I, and as I'm sure most of you do by this point, that the government that we have should reflect every single one of us and all of our voices, not just those voices that are fortunate enough to have personal wealth, not just those voices that have been the heads of companies, not just those voices that have been in the State House for 20 years, but all of our voices, because the government, both in this state and in Washington, belongs to all of the citizens of this state and this country, and that is what Brenda's run is all about. So I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. We are going to do a Spitfire lineup of speakers. We have some great folks here to speak in support of Brenda. And that first person is going to be Laura Chapman, who to this group I'm sure needs very little introduction. She is the organizer of the Putney Huddle. She is on the select board in Putney, and she has done many more numerous things that are just wonderful and too many to mention. So Laura Chapman.
So Brenda and I started our political journey together, actually, but it has taken widely different roads. When we went to Detroit together for the Women's Convention, she told me that she was going to do this, and I'll be honest, I was like, really? Are you sure this is what you want to do? You've never served before. I was skeptical. Every last bit of skepticism I had, she has managed to just obliterate by going on the road and talking to the people and bringing her progressive voice out every day in such a strong and unique way. And she just proved to me, who believed in her but was skeptical of what she was doing, that she is the right woman for the job. And I couldn't be more proud of what she's doing, and I couldn't be more proud to have already voted for her. So
vote again.
I wish I could. If I could, I would. But
Vote office.
so that's all I got. Thank you.
I'll give you a hug.
Yes, I'm so proud of you. You've done such a great job. Okay.
All right, thank you, Laura. So our next speaker is a current sitting representative in the State House. He represents, I'm not even going to try to list all of the towns, Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster. Excellent. And Wyndham 4, the district for Wyndham 4, much simpler. Mike Merwicki.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak up for somebody who is trying to speak up for all of us here in Vermont. We are in interesting times, and there's an old Chinese proverb that may you live in interesting times, and they say it has two meanings. At some points it's a blessing, and at some points it's a curse. So which way is it going to go is how whatever we feed. As we're watching what's happening in state government here and state governments across the country, we're noticing that what's happening in Washington is changing what's happening in our state capitals. For the most part, state government can be a pretty boring entity. We focus on roads and bridges and schools and making sure that things happen on an everyday basis that should. But the election of 2016 changed all that. What we're seeing now is that the chaos in Washington is trickling down into Montpelier, into Brattleboro, into Putney. 2 years ago, When I ran for re-election, I found out I was on a target list for 22 state legislators funded by the Koch brothers. What are the Koch brothers doing reaching way down into these little campaigns? So now we have to do things differently. When the Trump administration says we don't want to fund Planned Parenthood anymore, what we're going to say is yes. This represents the values that Vermont has, that women should have access to health care. When the Trump administration says we're going to gut the EPA, we're going to say we don't agree. We're going to put those statutes that we want in state law. And when we see the effects of the stratification of income and inequality, what we're going to say in Vermont is that that's not going to work here. That's not who we are. That's not our values. Even though we've found out recently that because of the Trump tax cuts, the highest earners in Vermont got a $280 million tax break last year. That's money that could go to daycare, to elder care, to disabilities, to roads, to bridges. And that's why I'm supporting Brenda. When it comes to the values that we want to see in a Vermont leader, Brenda lines right up with what I want to see. She shares the values of hard work and hope. The idea that, as our state motto says, freedom and unity, we can keep those things in balance here in Vermont. That it's not contradictory to want those things and to speak for all people. So I ask you to join me in voting for Brenda, and let's go on to November. Thanks, Brenda.
All right, thank you very much, Mike. Our next speaker is Nick Clark. Nick is an indispensable member of our team. He designed our beautiful logo, which has won the logo contest amongst all the campaigns. That's been verified by many, many people across Vermont. Nick helps us with debate prep and so many other things that I probably could not list in a 2-minute span. So Nick.
Hello. My background is actually in youth organizing. I got started after Bernie's 2016 run. And a lot of what I spend my time thinking about politically is why don't people vote? Why don't young people vote? Why is turnout always so low? And the conclusion I've come to so far is that people feel as if they don't belong, as if they're not a part of the system. They don't have ownership in government. They don't have ownership in the economy. And it's because the economy is rigged against them, as Bernie would say. I was also raised by a low-income single mother, as Brenda is. And we grew up in Vermont. In the 90s, I remember going into a hardware store and waiting in the parking lot, and my mom came back out in tears because no one in there would help a woman with her drywall questions. And I remember driving around on Christmas Eve. She had just gotten a paycheck, and we were looking for a Christmas tree, and she couldn't find one. And I remember pulling over on the side of the road and watching her cry in desperation as she was trying to put a holiday together. She got her master's from Dartmouth in women's studies. She did her thesis on low-income single mothers, and she never earned more than $15 an hour. She passed away from ovarian cancer with more in student loan debt than in medical bills. So when Brenda announced, it was obviously something I had no problem connecting to, a low-income single mother. I know she's going to fight harder than anyone else I've ever seen. I know she's going to be more resilient and have more grit. She's going to care more, and she's less likely to give up on someone when they need help than any other person. And beyond that, when she talks about a bottom-up economy, my mother in the 90s and early 2000s in Vermont would have benefited from a bottom-up economy. She would have felt like she belonged, like she had ownership in the community. So to me, a bottom-up economy is about more than a livable wage. which my mom never achieved. It's about more than universal health care, which she never saw. It's about all the issues. It's about affordable housing. It's about transportation. It's about college tuition. It's about the environment and solar panels and just affording heating fuel. But a bottom-up economy is also about more than just the economy. It's about the social fabric of small Vermont communities. It's about low-income single mothers feeling like they are connected and have a voice, but it's also about their children who may at some point watch their mothers cry. You know, it's about our nieces and our nephews and families with two parents, with two moms and two dads, or a mom and a dad. It's about grandparents and seniors and young adults that are leaving the state, or young adults that are trying to make a living here. It's about white and black and everyone. A bottom-up economy truly means a Vermont for all of us. It's not just a campaign slogan. It's not just about the economy. And I didn't get that until Brenda's campaign. And I think a lot about politics. I'm a little nerdy. But so what makes her different than the other candidates is that she connects the dots. And she connected the dots in me understanding how all of that is working and why voter turnout is low. But she's also connected the dots in her career between small business and farms and the arts. She's connected the dots between activism and the legislator and party leadership. She's someone that builds bridges and truly believes in a vision for a Vermont for all of us. It's really not just a slogan. And we should have had a bottom-up economy in the early 2000s and in the 90s. And now it's more important than ever. We need a bottom-up economy, at least in 2018, if we couldn't have it then. And the good news is that changing Vermont is relatively easy. All we have to do is vote. And all we have to do is bring one or two people to the polls with us. It's not just enough to vote on our own. We have to bring a friend or a relative to vote too. Because Brenda, as governor, is going to connect more dots than we've already seen her connect. And that's when community comes alive. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is actually one of the first people I met when I moved to Vermont. He helped me get started in community organizing. He is a great resource for anyone in the activist community, in the political community, and really all across the state. And we are honored to have his support, the executive director and co-founder of Justice for All, Mark Hughes.
So, I just drove 150 miles to get here. Okay, so we were talking to Teddy this morning, and Brenda, and I said, you know, it's time to take the gloves off. We need to get busy. So we've got about a week left. Spur of the moment, Christine Longmore, who's back there, she's also very active in the racial justice community. She and I just jumped in the car and we rolled down here. So that's kind of what happened. We did that. We just drove 150 miles and I don't regret 1 mile of it. I'm glad that I'm here, Brenda, and I'm so happy to be here to support you this evening. I really am. Again, my name is Mark Hughes, and I am the executive director and co-founder of Justice for All, a racial justice organization. Some of the things that we've done over the last couple of years have involved racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice system advisory panel, which was Act 54 last year, which made it. And Act 9, which you probably don't know about yet, is a systemic racism bill, which started off as 281. There was a certain governor who vetoed it, and also created an executive order which completely undermined it. But we slid S5 through in the special session, and it got signed, and it became Act 9. But the executive order is still there, ominously. 828-3333 would be the number you might want to call and ask about it. 828-3333. Ask the governor what the hell's going on with the executive order and why is it still there. Some of the other things that we've done is like tons and tons of community organizing surrounding racial justice across the entire state. Just making a lot of progress, bringing to light things like the existence of slavery in our own Constitution and the fact that nobody's really noticed that, although everybody seems to take an oath to it every year. And the fact that 2019 is the year in which the Constitution opens back up for a change. And we're going to see that happen. We're going to see that initiated this year. So just a lot of work across the state. I first met Brenda Siegel, I want to say a few months ago, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and we had the opportunity to have a long conversation. I think it was in the VDP office. And I was honestly just kind of like going, okay. And then also at the same time, it was, I've been, in and out of the Ellers campaign over a period of time. Never really was interested much in the Hallquist campaign, but I've spoken to all of them. I've been on the fence for quite a while, up until about a few weeks ago. And I think one of the key words that I would characterize Brenda with is just awesome. The awesome word of genuine. And what I mean by genuine is I know, there's no doubt in my military mind that this woman, this candidate, she says what she means, and she means every word of what she says. I too was raised by a single mother. I was raised by a single mother in the middle of northeastern Iowa. 5 boys and an African American woman raising us in northeastern Iowa. And I know what it means to come from nothing, to come from dirt. I know what it means to be dirt poor. I know what it means to see a mother struggling, in times where there's just no help out there. So we had a lot of conversations, and I finally came full circle. And what I decided, and what I wanted to express today, and the reason why I drove 150 miles is I wanted to come down here and let you know that this is our next governor. I came down to let you know that there's a lot of inflammatory rhetoric that you're going to hear in the media across the United States. You're going to hear, just a lot of words like Obamacare and like states' rights, and folks are going to be telling you should be afraid because there's this false narrative of scarcity, because maybe those guys down there at the border might come across and take our jobs or take our kids' places in schools. That we might have a public safety issue because those people that might come into this nation from other nations, maybe the 6 that are on the list, by the way, which all happen to be black and brown, are somehow or another going to take what it is that we have or cause us to be less safe. And the intent is to cause us to have consternation or resentment or even fear of black and brown people. And to use that to form policies by putting people in office who will create those policies. And at the end of the day, they will have a more severe impact on more numbers of white people than black and brown people. It's always happened. It always does happen. It's been happening since 1968. I say we call them on it now. I say that we vote for a person who understands these dynamics in politics, who understands and is not afraid to step up and speak out and call these things out for what they are. I say we vote for Brenda Siegel. And finally, the last thing I came to let you know is that there are a lot of naysayers right now that are telling us we can't beat this guy. He's got so much money, he's got a war chest. They keep putting money in it. You're going to hear a lot of folks that say, I'm not going to vote, or the vote out is going to be so low, that the turnout's going to be so low that why should we even turn out? And I just say stop right there and think about what we just did 2 years ago. Okay? I refuse to believe that there is a person in this state that is unbeatable, first of all. I refuse to believe that we concede before we start. I believe that what we do is we fight this fight 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, and if necessary, 1 second at a time, and we take this guy all the way to the wall because Brenda Siegel can beat this guy. So the folks who are staying home, get them out. If you're thinking about throwing your hands up and saying it's over, I challenge you on it. Call me and I'll give you a good chewing out, okay? Because we got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of stuff to do in moving forward. And I believe we have the candidate to get the job done. So it gives me great pleasure. In fact, it's a huge honor to have the opportunity to drive here for 150 miles to come out of Chittenden County, to come down here tonight to introduce to you the next governor of the state of Vermont, Brenda Siegel.
I'm not sure I can follow that up really, actually. So, about a year and a half ago, I started doing some informal research. Actually, before I even start, I just want to thank everybody that's just spoken. All of it was extremely meaningful to me. Laura's not here, but Laura's a dear, dear friend of mine, and our journey to the Women's Convention was an incredible life changer for all of us. Mike, I didn't know you were going to endorse me when you endorsed me, and it really touched my heart to hear it. And not just my experience with you endorsing me and you're as a representative, but as a human being, especially in this last several months of my life and my family's life, you have been an amazing person to my family. Okay, Nick has been invaluable to this campaign, and he has a really excellent way of pushing me, and it makes me a much stronger and much better candidate. And everything that you said today is really powerful. And I'm not just running because of my own life experience, but because of experiences like the life that you had, and wanting to make sure that other families have a stronger ability to survive. And Mark, I mean, wow, what a great talk you just gave. And your work around the state on racial justice and other issues has been incredible, and also the way that you have pushed me to learn even more about that issue and speak even stronger about that issue has been something that I think is extremely important, and why we need to have all the voices at the table. It's not my life experience, so I need other people to push me to be pushing the right initiatives forward. So about thanks, Dad. And also my family here, my sister-in-law Aya, and my dad and son and niece Audrey, and my Aunt Sally Ann. We're into my eyesight at that moment. Incredible to have your support throughout the campaign. So back to the stump speech. About a year and a half ago, I started doing some informal research to find out how well I am reflected in our government as a low-income single mom. I, of course, found out that I'm not reflected, not at all, not locally, not nationally, and not statewide. Shame. That runs antithetical to everything I believe, which is that unless and until all of our voices are at the table, we are not going to see the changes that we want and need to see across this nation and across this state. So I spent that wasn't really enough for me, because I understand I'm coming from a different funnel. So I spent the last year doing some training programs with Emerge Vermont's boot camp, the Vote, Run, Lead, Run As You Are national training, and at the Women's Convention I took leadership courses. I also met with as many legislators as I could think of and organizations to come up with a vision for Vermont that was what we needed and what Vermonters could buy into, and what our legislature could get behind or with me on in order to move initiatives forward once I'm in office. What I know from my career, which has been developing a long-term economic driver for this community, the Southern Vermont Dance Festival, following Tropical Storm Irene, in which my son and I lost all of our belongings, is that when you utilize the resources that already exist in our state, in our community, it's the arts, it's recreation, it's farms, and we connect them to businesses, and we get government to participate, that is when we begin to see our economy grow. It is when we use what's already here. So we know that wealth is not trickling down, and we know that poverty is trickling up. We know that, right, because I grew up in an upper middle class family, and I am a low income single mom. And I am struggling to get out of that position. What we need to do is build our economy from the bottom up. We need to pass and sign the legislation that was vetoed this year, including raising the minimum wage, paid family and medical leave, the bills that clean up our waterways, the toxics bills, the bill that taxes opioid manufacturers. Those are bills that need to be passed and signed as soon as they can. But we can't just do that. We need to move towards a housing first model for homelessness. That's essential. I understand that I believe that there's a moral imperative for all of these issues. I understand that there are a lot of people who don't believe with me that there's a moral imperative. What I think it's important for Vermonters to understand is that there's also an economic imperative for all of these issues. So regardless if you believe with me that it's a moral issue, it's an economic issue. We are spending an exponential amount of money on homelessness. I receive Section 8 housing. One time I was with my Section 8 caseworker, and I asked him, how much money do we spend on hotels every year for homeless people in the winter? He said, I don't know that, but one time I could have housed 17 families for about $500 a month permanently. It didn't meet the state standards. The state said no. So he went back and calculated how much money we spent on hotels for those 17 families for 1 month. He estimated that in that month we spent $47,000 on 17 families to keep them out of the cold for 1 month instead of permanently. It's an economic issue. Also part of building a bottom-up economy is moving to 90 to 100% renewable energy more quickly. We want to give the towns the opportunity to come up with a plan that works. It has to work and the state has to approve it. But that a plan for them to come up with. What we know is that when we do that, it reaches a broad spectrum of issues. It helps build jobs in our state. It helps bring people to our state because it's a very attractive idea to be moving to 90 to 100% renewable energy. And when renewable energy is done right, it is also reaching people in poverty and people at middle income levels. That means that when we do renewable energy right, we are also working on the issue of poverty in this state. It's very important. I also have taught in our schools a lot. What I know is that we have a strong public education system, and we need to support and promote our public education system instead of undermining it like we've been seeing for the last 2 years from Phil Scott. What's really important to understand is that this year, 50% of our towns saw a property tax increase, despite that Phil Scott said that he was flatlining property taxes. 50% of our towns this year saw a property tax increase, and it was the towns who had the most need. So the towns who have the most need are being penalized and having to pay more in property taxes. In years 3, 4, and 5 of Phil Scott's plan, all of us will see a property tax increase. That plan is being made in order to undermine our public schools. The hope is that then in town meeting, we will all vote down our school budgets, which will undermine our public schools, and then we can move to a voucher system. We need to be honest about what this is. We, of course, can do things to strengthen our public schools, like implementing the ethnic studies standard, a bill that I would like to see go through in the next session. That allows us to teach the real history of this state and this country. It also allows us to create a panel, which then allows all of our students to be more welcomed into the school systems that we have. And we need to make sure that panel includes people of color, so it is the people who are closest to the problem that are solving the problem. On March 7th is when I decided for sure that I would run for governor. On March 8th, my nephew died of a heroin overdose. He was a son of my brother who died 20 years ago of a heroin overdose. I watched the system fail him. I know that we need to focus on harm reduction first, treatment and recovery on demand and medically assisted treatment on demand, dual diagnosis support, and our criminal justice reform. About 3 weeks ago, I released a comprehensive 4-part plan to heal the opioid epidemic, endorsed by Chittenden County's State's Attorney, Sarah George. If you don't know, Chittenden County is doing way better than we are doing here with this epidemic. We can talk more about that in a few minutes if people have questions about that plan. I also want to see us transform our transportation system. 50% of our carbon output in this state is transportation, is the way we drive. When I first started the campaign, I thought that what we would be doing is studying transportation, because I understood that most of our money comes from federal funds. What I've learned since is that we actually have a lot of private public transportation in this state, private companies, and those companies are not necessarily organized well. So a lot of them are using the exact same routes, and their times are not at times when people can use them to get to work or home from work. So what my plan calls for is that we look at a grid of all the transportation that exists in this state, that we make sure that we connect the transportation to all the different areas of this state, so that in counties like Addison County, where they actually have a lot of transportation, we can reach almost every home. Public transportation is essential because our aging population is isolated at home in rural communities, and people in poverty and people suffering from mental illness, from opiate use disorder, from any kind of physical disability, can't get to work, can't get to their services because they don't have access to a car, and they may not have money for a car if they were able to drive. What I know is that all of these issues are interconnected. If you're working on racial justice, but you're not working on environmental justice, then you're not working on racial justice. If you're working on environmental justice and you're not working on economic justice, then you're not working on environmental justice. If you're working on gender justice or criminal justice and you're not working on racial justice, then you're not working on that. We have to have a governor that can interconnect these issues, that can connect the dots, that can put the pieces together. What I also know is that for a long time, only certain people have been allowed in to our system. That we need to redefine leadership. That we need to allow people who haven't had access in the past to be allowed in at every level of leadership. We don't have 10 or 20 years to wait for marginalized communities to be in leadership. We have to start now. We have to take the leap that those that are closest to the problem are able to solve the problem. It is when we redefine leadership, when we all come together, when we decide that access is no longer going to be an issue, that is when we build a Vermont that works for all of us. And now anyone can ask me questions. Thank you all for coming. Oh, before you ask me questions, I got a little call from my campaign manager over here. This is Teddy, my campaign manager. Also thank him. I just want to say Teddy volunteered for the first month or more, and then is paid now. But he came in because he believed in it, and it's his first statewide race. And I don't know those of you that have been watching this race, but Teddy has done a phenomenal job. Phenomenal job. Because he doesn't give me my phone. No. We have been keeping up with less money, less staff, and we have been getting everywhere in the state, doing everything that we need to do to make sure that we can win this race. So it's been really amazing. But he just reminded me that what I need to say right now is that we have bumper stickers and stickers. If you haven't signed in, we want everyone to sign in. And most importantly, in order to get through the rest of this primary and on to the general, we are having 400 of our supporters give $25 at least. If you can give more, please give more, because we are trying to make sure that we are talking to every Vermonter and not just wealthy Vermonters, out-of-state donors. I am not traveling to other states to have big fundraisers. I am not accepting corporate contributions. I want it to come from you. I want our voice to be the voice that matters in this campaign and when I'm in office. Now you can ask questions.
Yesterday or today, the governor received $160,000 worth of PAC money for advertising, and I think that follows $100,000 worth of PAC money coming in to support him. So, you know, the $25 sounds cute in comparison to $250,000. How do we compete?
Well, a couple things are true. Number one, I've spent this primary making sure that I've been lining up fundraising for the general election. I figured out pretty early on that we weren't going to need the big money in the primary, but we were going to need it in the general. And so we need to make sure that we're getting people in, because I'm not going to take corporate contributions or solicit corporate contributions at all. However, whoever wins this primary better be able to win with less money than Phil Scott has, because we are never going to outspend him. I will say that again. Money should not be the defining factor, because we will never outspend him. This person better be more inspirational. They better have their eye on what Vermonters need, and they better be able to debate him at every account of what he has done for the last 2 years. That is what is going to beat him. Also, a little side note story. I found out on, I don't remember what day that was, Saturday, that there's a poll going around. This is my favorite thing. There's a poll going around, we're assuming from the RGA, we don't really know from who, but it sounds like a Democratic poll, it's a push poll. And they ask a bunch of normal questions, and then all of a sudden they say, but you wouldn't vote for that far left extremist Brenda Siegel, would you? And it's the only name mentioned. So another thing that's really important to note here, that some of that money I'm sure went to that, and that's really important to note, is that they are afraid of me winning. So let's make sure that I'm the one that wins. Any other questions? Then we'll just visit. That's great. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, I'm Daniel Quip here in Brattleboro. I'm a local climate activist. I'm also a teacher, and I want to tell you why I'm supporting Brenda Siegel for governor. I've known Brenda for a few years in the activist circles through work with Rights and Democracy and other grassroots organizations, and I know Brenda to be a person of vision and integrity and energy, and I think that right now that's what we need at the State House. We need somebody to show us a way forward and marshal all of the great energy that we have in the State House and get bills on her desk that she can sign that will help the lives of regular Vermonters. So that's why I'm going for Brenda.
I'm for Brenda Siegel. I'm behind her on her run for governor because she speaks from the heart. Her heart's in the right place. She's got a real global view of the issues, and she connects the dots. There's nobody else out there that is doing that. Arlene Disler in Brattleboro.
Hi, my name is Ed Scipione, and I live in Brattleboro, Vermont. And I support Brenda for a number of reasons, but the two that really jump out at me is I feel that she's the candidate that really represents the things that are important to me as a constituent here in Brattleboro. And I'm gone over her opioid plan, and I feel that it's very well thought out. It's very progressive, and I also was lucky enough to have a conversation with her today and meet her in person for the first time. which I was very, very impressed with her. We had some discussions about healthcare and some of her plans for healthcare, and I was very satisfied that she is the type of candidate that will get the changes that need to be made in Vermont for everyday people like myself. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Teddy Wazazak. I am Brenda Siegel's campaign manager. Tonight we had a great event hosted on the rooftop of the Whetstone Station. It was our countdown to Election Day kickoff, and we had a great turnout. 25 or 30 people came out to listen to Brenda and hear her message, and we got to have some great conversations tonight about all of the things Brenda is going to do to make the state better. We talked about her comprehensive opioid plan, we talked about building a bottom-up economy, we talked about transforming our transportation system, and we talked about how important it is to support our public schools. I know Brenda is going to follow through on all of the promises that she is making us, and I know that Brenda will work every day to build a Vermont that works for all of us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brenda Siegel. I'm son of Brenda Siegel, who's running for governor, and I just want to talk a little bit about why she would be good governor. She has raised me by herself for 16, well, my whole life. So I'm 16 years old since I was born, and she has been the best mother anyone could have. And she told me that she wanted to run for governor when a couple months ago, probably 3-4 months before she announced, and I supported it fully because I knew that our state was starting to come to shambles or fall apart, and I knew that we needed someone who was strong and knew how to use her strength and her power to help her state. I know more than anything that she loves everybody, including our state and everyone in the state. And I think that as governor, she would be the best candidate because she has so much compassion, so much love, and she knows everything. Right up until she announced she was going to the State House 3 times a week, 4 times a week, going, lobbying, reading these speeches that she wrote, and talking and learning. And she did all this so that she could be the best candidate and be informed, and as a leader could lead strong and just amazing for the state. I've seen her throughout the campaign grow, learn more, talk to me, talk to everybody, and talk to people and learn their stories and care more than any other candidate. And I just hope that if you see this and you do your research and you just trust me and trust everyone you've heard, that she is the best candidate and she will help the state and everyone in it as much as possible. She wants a Vermont for all of us, and it's not just a slogan, it's really, really what she wants. Thank you.
These green hills and silver waters are my home. They belong to me and to all of her sons and daughters. May they be strong and forever free. Let us live to protect may they be strong and forever free. Let us live to protect her beauty and look with pride on the golden dome. They say home is where the heart is. These green mountains are my home. These green mountains are